We go. We send the recording to the right place. We'll be able to get it later. Well, welcome everyone to round two of Coach Connect for 24-25. Really excited by the feedback we had from the first session last month and really looking forward to tonight's topic. First of all, obviously want to again recognise that the land on which the Academy is located, where our athletes train and compete, is the traditional land of the Dharawal people. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Again, just a quick reminder for all our coaching resources that are available at Linktree/SWAS coach, or via that QR code. And again, the resource for tonight sits under here under this Coach Connect presentation. So again, we can display this a little bit later on this evening so we can check. Right now, I'd like to introduce our West Future Stars Program Coordinator, Guy Creber, who is leading tonight's session on program planning, team building, and camps. So we'll just hand over to Guy. I will stop sharing.
Okay, we right? Can you view that, Steve?
Yep. Yes, I can see your screen. I think everyone else can.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Steve. Steve gave me quite a significant task this week to present on a number of topics. They're all intertwined in effect. Program planning, session planning, individual athlete performance plans, team building, and camps. So they're the 5 topics I want to touch upon this evening. I don't want to spend too much time on each topic in detail because it'll take us probably an hour on each one, but I want to give an overview of each of those areas as we go through. So the first one is program planning. Program planning is about, in effect, developing a program or an outline for the squad season. And it's about providing a template of the structure of events, the key targets and outcomes proposed for that squad in the season. Obviously, we need to make sure we comply with the Academy Sport Program Framework and also obviously meet the FTEM model requirements and the requirements of the Academy's Academy life cycle, which I'll talk about in a minute. As part of that process, implementation of the Academy life cycle and sport program framework is key to the success of each sporting program and to the overall high performance outcomes of the Academy. So just talking to Steve before, the program is about upfront outlining what we intend to do for a squad over the season, but also it's about at the end of the season going back to that program and looking at what we've done, whether we've achieved the outcomes that we sought initially, and where we were successful and where we need to improve maybe the following season or the like. So it's also an evolving document. I talk about it being planned up front, but we don't often know the actual dates of a lot of the activities, so we can only just forecast the draft dates of some of these activities and events. And as time moves on, we'll get more and more information about dates and those sort of things, and maybe more events might develop that we can add to the program as well as we go along. Steve, as I mentioned, and others here as well, if you've got some comments or questions as I go along, please fire away. Okay, so we know what the FTEM model is about. It's about outlining the pathway for athletes from the foundation through to the talent, to the elite, to the mastery level. And we know SWAS and the academies are focusing on maybe the upper foundation levels into the lower 2 or 3 tiers of the talent framework. Okay, so, and as part of that, we know that there's certain requirements. We've got athletes who are emerging in effect from a recreational content, I suppose you'd say, to they're starting to perform, they've got talent, they're aspiring in most cases to move ahead into a higher level of performance, maybe into an NSWIS program or a state or national program. So it's important for us to outline in our program what we want to do for those athletes in the next 6 to 8 to 12 months. Okay, and that's what the program is about. Underpinning all of that, we want to move those athletes forward, thinking about, in effect, what NSWIS have outlined, the Office of Sport have outlined in terms of what is important for a performance athlete. Relevant and robust physicality, relevant and robust physiological capacity, strong and robust sport-specific skills, strong well-being and engagement skills, strong and robust psychological skills and attributes, and favourable developmental background and a wide sports sampling. So we want to be, I suppose, pushing these athletes forward with those 6 attributes in mind, and also fitting in with the athlete life cycle that we've got within SWAS, which I'll talk about in a second. The athlete life cycle we know about. In effect, it brings together all those NSWIS Office of Sport FTEM characteristics. So we're talking about providing an environment for our athletes where we want to progress individual skill development for those athletes. We want to provide targeted sports education. We want to provide sports science and strength and conditioning outcomes for them. We want to provide them with performance opportunities, so competition, events and those sort of things. As well as that, we want to make sure we look after them. So we want to provide wellbeing and support services as well along the way. So doing that life cycle, we want to move them from, in effect, as I've said to the left there, as SWAS have said, community youth, citizen identified with sport performance potential, to, in effect, athletes on the pathway process, looking to move into a performance pathway, state or national level. So that's what we're after, and that's what our program wants to do. It wants to embed that in our I suppose, 6 to 12 month regime for our athletes. Extending upon that, we know that SWAS have outlined what requirements there are against each of those areas of influence, I suppose I'd call it. So individual skill development, 20 hours over a program length, sport-specific training, targeted sports education, 10 hours, lectures and practical workshops, sports science, strength and conditioning, 20 hours, performance opportunities, 24 hours. So camps, educational activities that support that, wellbeing and support services, 8 hours, lectures, workshops about the person, not necessarily about performance. So they're the sort of things that we need to make sure that we embed in our program as we move forward. So in effect, I suppose, Steve, you'd say that they're the key things that the program has to encapsulate. Okay, so in effect, what I'm thinking and what I've done in the past is I've developed a season program of about maybe 5 or 6 pages long, and it's contained these aspects: coaching and management structure, aspects to do with athlete selection and how we go about that, then encapsulating the excellence framework we're talking about, so education, academy-wide and sport-specific, outline of individual skill development and training, SWAS and external.
This meeting is being recorded.
Strength and conditioning, testing, competition events and opportunities, wellbeing and support services, consideration of athlete home environment requirements and schedule. So we need to make sure that we're developing our program in the light of what the athlete is doing separately in their home environment, in their home competition and training environment as well. And also we need to think about high-level resourcing people and equipment. We don't want to go into too much detail. The dollars and the actual meat of all of that will be dealt with by SWAS in consultation with the coaches as they develop their program. But our initial program needs to consider at a high level the sort of resourcing, the people and equipment we'll need to implement that program in the next 6 to 12 months. So that's what, in effect, my understanding of program planning is about for a squad for a season. And we need to do that initially. We don't want to do it halfway through the season when half the season is gone. We need to do it initially And as I said, it may well evolve with time over the season, but we need to have that upfront grunt to get that in place. On the left there, you can see a table. I think that's from a basketball example. Jeff, you might know, or Steve, and it outlines, for example, all the, those various provisions we're making for our squad during the season. So we've got academy-wide education program, individual skill development, sport-specific education, strength and conditioning, sports science testing, performance opportunities, and wellbeing and support services. And they've got various aspects and activities there to support that, and things like what the detail is that they're about, the dates, and the provider, I think, is also talked about there. So that's an example of what I might see in the back of a squad program. Yeah, so I'd have some narrative up front talking about those various categories I've just mentioned, but then at the back I'll have a plan or an outline of what that program will look like from a calendar perspective and from an activity perspective. Here's an example of what I've done in the past. We just saw the basketball example. This is what I've done from a calendar perspective, and I've had that in the back of my program in the past. And this is more a diagrammatic way of showing it. And it talks about, for example, skill sessions, competition, education, strength and conditioning, testing, camps, academy games, civic receptions, and there's probably 2 or 3 other aspects, categories of item I could put in there as well. But I've actually tried at the start of the season to identify when some of these things will most likely happen. And I've included that as a calendar in the back of my program. So that then probably puts a diagrammatic aspect or content to what I'm putting forward to SWOS as part of my squad program. So that's pretty much the programming aspect. That's the high level stuff, the outline of what we're proposing to do. We need to talk that through with SWOS. So obviously we give them a draft. We want to sit down and talk through the program with them, and then they can separately go away and crunch some numbers, and we can talk about whether things are feasible or not, especially things like camps and those sort of things can be quite expensive. So we need to make sure that, we have our program certainly in draft form presented up front in a format I've just mentioned. Okay, so that's the program aspect of our season planning. And I'm talking about, I've been a SWOS program coach for 5 years or so, going back a few years, and that's the sort of thing that I would do. And sometimes I would even in that program have things like a section about doing things differently, or what can we do different this year than we did last year, or those sort of things as well. So I've actually embellished the program previously to talk about how we can improve things moving forward compared to the previous years. Now I want to move into talking about individual session plans. So I'm going from the program, which is high level strategic in effect, to now talking about developing individual session plans. So we're now talking about the individual sessions that make up, a day or so or a session or so shown in that program. So it might be for me, it could be a swim and a bike session for triathletes, for example. So individual session plans, there's a whole range of different templates around that I've seen in the SWOS system and elsewhere. There's a couple shown there. They're both netball ones, I believe. The first one is about program. So it's in effect representing the overall program for the year, but then it falls into a training plan outline for a particular session in that program. So it talks about things like warm-up, conditioning drills, technical drills, tactical drills, and then free play. And there's probably a cool-down process to that as well. So that's all about individual session planning. And I'll show you what I've done in the past for my triathlete program from a session perspective. But an individual session planning process is about a detailed outline of individual training sessions and activities, okay? So it's about a specific training session, but it's linked to the overall training program as such. Session plan contains introduction, development, implementation, closure, and evaluation. So in effect, it's a warm-up, main session, cool down, and an evaluation process, feedback and evaluation. And generally, an individual session plan will include aims and goals, key focus areas for the session, the venue diagrams potentially, which are really useful in my view, skill activities, sequence of events, timing and duration of activities, instruction content, so how you might instruct athletes to do a particular skill within that session, strategies and resources, equipment, coaching points, might be a how-to or something to make the athlete think, to go and make their own mind up about how to actually go and execute a skill, and content for discussion and feedback at the end of the session. So, and also theoretically, a session plan should include a risk assessment management process as well as safety provision. So safety is a really critical component of that. Here's a typical AIS session plan that was used for triathletes. This is probably about 4 or 5 years old now, but it certainly covers every aspect in here. It's got up the top there, it's got the group, the duration, venue, attendance, equipment and other resources required, session objectives, introduction. So it talks about what you need to say to the athletes when they turn up for the session. It talks about getting started, getting into the main session and then finishing up. So it outlines the activities they want to present and the skills they want to focus on during the session. And then it talks about how they want to deliver that. So there could well be ways to do those activities that need to be outlined in this session plan. And then down the bottom, it ends up with notes from the session. It might also talk about things like weather, incidents that happen, any injuries. And then it has a final session evaluation process at the end of that session. So that's a really important component for sessions, is to have some sort of session evaluation, feedback from athletes, and then take away those things for future reference, just in case you need to modify things moving forward. Here's a couple of session plans that I've done in the past for my athletes, and these go back probably 3 or 4 years, but the one on the left there is about a swim session, and the one on the right is a bike session. And this was to do, I think I was presenting some development sessions at a regional academy games. So there was an academy games process happening, but the day before we had some development sessions, and I took the swim and the bike sessions and had, I don't know, 50 or 60 athletes there doing these things. So my session plan back then, I've included introduction, development content, closure, and then evaluation, but I've outlined in there in quite a fair bit of detail what the actual activities of each of those skill demonstrations and occupation of those skill events would have included. So I've included things like catch and pull for the swim, things about hand entry, pull focus, using pull buoy, all those sort of things. And I've talked about the equipment required from athletes, strategies and resources, verbal and visual demonstrations, short run in sand to and from water edge at the start and finish of that session. So it must have been an open water swim rather than a pool swim. So we're talking about swimming in open water. So it was a swim set on and off a beach, basically. And then I've got an evaluation section at the end of that. And the same for the bike session, same sort of thing, and outlining in detail of what I want the athletes to do. So the introductory bit I was outlining to the athletes. The development section is what I wanted them to do and what they were outlined to do as part of their process. So we went through and ticked those boxes. Closure was asking if they had any questions, answer those, provide any feedback as necessary, then go through an evaluation process. So that in effect is an example of one of my session plans, but or 2 of my session plans, but the generic nature of those are all very similar, as you saw from the AIS format and also from the netball formats previously. Okay, so one of the other important things underpinning the strategic layer and then that session plan layer is in some cases in every case for athletes, we need to have an individual athlete performance plan, which outlines individual aspects of coaching that we need to bring into play. So we might have a session for a swim or a session for a bike, for example, but we might also feed into that John Smith needs to focus on pedaling technique, or Jane Smith needs to focus on cornering, those sort of aspects. So I like to develop individual athlete performance plans or development plans for each individual athlete. This is the sort of thing that SWAS is keen on this year, that we take this to the next level. Historically, we've, in triathlon, we've always had these, but we haven't brought them to I suppose, the formalized level. But the suggestion this year is that we do develop individual athlete performance plans for each athlete. And I know with the West Future Stars that I'm managing, this will be one of the first tasks that I do, particularly with West Future Stars. It'll be important for me to understand where the athletes are coming from a whole range of aspects: physical, technical, tactical, psychological, personal development aspects. So really important that we look at developing individual athlete performance plans for our athletes this season. What I did a couple of years back, I did a presentation to SWAS about the building blocks of performance. And I put forward that there are 12 key building blocks of performance: life balance, structured training, skills, team, injury prevention management, strength and conditioning, psychology, goal setting and planning, communication, nutrition, sleep, recovery. So what I've done down the right-hand side there, I've summarized, for example, what typically the bottom four building blocks would look like: life balance, structured training, skills, team, for example. And next page, I've outlined the second row: goal setting, planning, psychology, strength and conditioning, injury prevention and management. And here I've outlined on the top row: communication, nutrition, sleep and recovery. And why I'm raising this is that I've used this building blocks of performance template that I developed to develop an athlete performance self-assessment, and then subsequently a coach assessment process for assessing each of my athletes to feed information into my individual athlete performance plan. Does that make sense? So here I've got the athlete to go through each of these categories and to assess himself out of 10 with some commentary about where he fits from each of these perspectives. So obviously for a team and allied health, he thinks he's quite low. He's only given himself a 2. He probably has parents who aren't quite interested in what he's doing, and he has no physiotherapist, no nutritionist, no psychologist, and no backup from maybe even a home athletic environment. But he does say he's a good communicator, so he's an 8, he reckons. So, and he gives me some justification for that. So I've used that information then to feed into what I've called a Triathlon New South Wales individual athlete development plan. Does that make sense? So I've actually got some foundation for this, and then I've put some of that content into this individual athlete performance plan. And I've used this template from Triathlon New South Wales, but there's a lot of different templates around that we could utilise, and I'm sure we can find probably 3 or 4 examples within SWAS to hand out to coaches as they move forward. Here, for example, this athlete, we've talked about his competition plan for the next 12 to 24 months. Okay, then we've talked about his key performance indicators for performance. Okay, a KPI review. So, we're looking at things like, for him, KPIs for success in the season. So we've outlined a whole range of things there and looking at where he's up to and where we need to focus on for the season coming up. Gaps in development, race specific. So we've identified where there are gaps in the race specific areas for him moving forward. Gaps in development, non-race specific. Okay, so we're talking about things like nutrition, mental strength and resilience and those sort of aspects. So I know this athlete probably was pretty good, but he probably needed to do a lot more work on things like nutrition, psychology, and those areas. And then the last aspect there, we're talking about personal excellence framework. So things like media skills and that sort of stuff, leadership skills. We certainly identified him needing to do some work in media. So those sort of things, again, all come back to our athlete excellence framework. So, you know, things like nutrition, the psychology, media skills are all things that SWAS will provide to our athletes through presentations and seminars in the next 6 to 12 months. So, and the athlete performance plan, development plan will identify that these athletes definitely need to go to those activities that SWAS are going to run. So I suppose that brings me to the end of the program planning, session planning, and athlete performance planning process in terms of moving forward with the athletes. Okay. So is there any questions up to this point in time, or any comments? Or Steve, do you have any issues with some of the stuff, or any thoughts about how we move forward?
No, definitely no issues. That's for sure. It's really good to see this, and again, recognizing there's more than one way to skin a cat, and more than one way to run a program as such. So I think Kat's on the call. I might just ask Kat just to jump in now, just while we're talking about program planning, just to reiterate what she's after, and that communication, or whether she wants to do that now or at the end of the Zoom. Kat, let me know.
No, I'm happy to have a chat now.
Yeah, so I think yeah, I'll hand over to Kat just very quickly, Guy, if that's all right.
All right. Hi, Kat.
No, thank you, guys. Yeah, so pretty much for 24-25, the approach is a bit different to what we've had in the past. But once you're onboarded, I would send you an Excel, and I guess you can share it with your assistant coaches. They'll also receive it too, but it gives you the opportunity to kind of go through those checklists and fit in those education sessions around what you want training to look like. And look, training can be fortnightly, or it can be camp. Like we're really flexible with the approach this year, because we understand that coaches are busy. So it gives you the opportunity to kind of craft your own year, within, of course, the guidelines that we set for each sport. But that's essentially kind of the beginning of that process, and what I'm kind of looking for from coaches, and to have that nice and early. So then if we're at trials, or if we're right at the start of onboarding, we can actually send that to parents, and they can get an idea of what it's going to look like, and they can plan their holidays, their work schedule around that. And then hopefully that will reflect better attendance for this year as well. That's all from me.
All right, Kat, great. That's probably putting a bit of detail to what I presented. So you're going to give people a format to fill out how they wish to run their season, basically, yeah, from a program perspective, which is really important, I think. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing to remember too, is that doesn't matter if you're a head coach, assistant coach, or an apprentice coach, is to have those conversations, or to do that planning in the back of your mind as well. And even as an assistant coach or apprentice coach, what would a program look like for you if you were the head coach? So then when you're having those conversations with the head coach, it's that collaborative approach to what works best for everyone and what is in the best interest of the athletes. So,
yeah. All right, thanks.
Guy, back to you.
I will talk about things like running sessions a bit later on, and the options of having camps in lieu of sessions. So I will raise that about 4 or 5 slides further on. But initially, just Steve was keen for me to talk about team building. And I think with my years of coaching athletes, I've noticed that when you put young adults and teenagers into an environment, in a team environment, they might not twig to things initially, but within 6 to 12 months, if not 2 years, they certainly start to come out of their shell a lot. They become more engaged, more productive, more creative. more motivated, and in some ways more satisfied. So, you know, and I could pick out immediately 4 or 5 names straight away that having these athletes in a team environment really transformed them from a character perspective, personally as well as from a sporting perspective. So team building is really critical. And that's one of the main things that we want to really, I suppose, progress or focus on this season. It's about encouraging trust and open communication within a group. You know, often you have people come into a group initially and they're really reluctant to talk. They don't want to share information. They're always listening rather than conveying information and speaking up. But what I find is it's about building relationships and a culture of collaboration and cooperation. And I think often it's not the coach that does that. It's more the other athletes tend to pull those aspects of someone's character out of them in terms of opening them up to a group rather than being insular. So the team building aspect is a really important one. So we can do that through, you know, a range of things like recognizing the contribution of people and teams, and supporting and acknowledging them in their endeavours. So the coaches can do that. The other athletes can do that as well. So it's a really important team aspect to encourage people to perform and to do things, and then commend them on how they perform and that sort of thing. So you can undertake team building exercises, and there's, you know, various opportunities there to do that, and I'll talk about that later on as well. Also, it encourages learning, knowledge sharing, and problem solving. So often if you get one person in a group of 5 or 6 people and they're all sharing their ideas, that person walks away with a whole lot of other ideas that they can go and work on. Yeah, so that learning, knowledge sharing, and problem solving benefit is really important. About 4 or 5 years ago, I sat in a group of coaches and we talked about what does team mean. And I recall sitting there, and this slide is extracted from that discussion, and I thought we'd get 5 or 6 immediate drops into the comment box, and we ended up with about 20 or 30, and each one of those words in there encapsulate what team means. You know, it's about commitment to people, it's about openness, it's about teamwork, it's about respect, it's about developing perspective, yeah, character, confidence, belonging, coordination. All those things come from being within a team. If the team's managed and operated well, and generally in our SWAS environment, all our squads have a, you know, a significant sort of environment to work within, good coaches to foster that, and I know I've seen an awful lot of athletes through the SWAS system who've come away with a large range of those attributes there as well, just from being in a team environment. So again, as I said, team is a really important aspect of what we're doing this year. I think we need to really push forward with that. How to develop teams, encourage belonging, equality, and inclusiveness. So coach can do that. The other athletes can certainly do that as well. You want to try and foster an environment where they're all included. You want to have team values and goals. So I don't know, going back 7 or 8 years, I got my triathlon squad, to develop a team motto. And I thought, oh, they'll come away with something quite, you know, innocuous and whatever, but it stuck with us for that whole period. Even nowadays, I still use it. It's about being safe, having fun, developing skills, going hard. Right. So that's our squad motto, and it's been there for almost 10 years now, and we keep reiterating it all the time, and all my athletes know it. So they're the sort of things that we want to do. We want to try and, you know, build that sort of environment for our athletes, sharing roles and responsibilities, and open communication, encourage listening, building bridges, social activities, you know, having barbecues and the like. But also you can do it within a squad training session. You can build bridges doing certain things. Encouraging people to work together to get things done, you know, design the training session. So sometimes I might go and say to 3 or 4 of my athletes, go away and you work out the training session today. They come in, and half an hour later, we've got a training session that they've developed and they're delivering. So that's a team environment aspect that's worked well. joint problem solving, sharing ideas, consensus. And, for example, we had group orienteering, for example, before. We've had groups in orienteering groups trying to work out how to get to a checkpoint or do certain things, that sort of stuff. So it all encourages teamwork and sharing ideas and working out solutions. So, again, developing teams, as Steve will say, and Kat will say, I'm sure this year, a real big focus of ours, important. Part of that, one of the best builders of teams is having a camp. And I've had a lot of camps. I've had camps in Australia and overseas. And the great thing is that everyone says, when's the next camp? When's the next camp? Because it's always a great time and they learn a lot, but they come away with a whole lot of different ideas and different aspects to their character and personalities that they didn't know they had sometimes. So this slide here from Triathlon Australia is about as athletes develop and as they go from the current level of the pathway they're at now into the higher talent area, into the elite and mastery areas, they'll be traveling overseas or internationally or nationally to camps and to competitions. So they'll need to get used to going away, living by themselves or in groups of athletes or with people to go to these events. So now is a good time to start introducing athletes to camps. I'm not suggesting we have 4 or 5 camps. 1 or 2 would be really good. But we need to think about having camps in our program. Obviously, they're beneficial. Take my word for it, every camp I've ever had has been beneficial from a whole range of reasons, sporting and personality character-wise. They have an effect on motivation. They improve confidence. You can provide education at those camps. They change their whole perspective on the sport. Okay, they come back wanting to train rather than begrudgingly coming to training sessions, for example. Camps provide, a focus on health and fitness, so you can actually provide targeted health and fitness activities during a camp. You can focus on particular technique and training areas around skills, for example, education, encourage responsibility and work ethic. You can give people tasks in a camp environment to do. They can develop tolerance and cultural awareness by going to a camp. Not so easy when you go to a 2 or 3 hour session, you can walk away, but when you're in a camp of 2 or 3 days, or even a daytime camp, and you go home at night, you're exposed to people and you need to really develop an awareness and an understanding of people. Self-esteem and confidence, enjoyment and love of sport, adventure, learning. As I said, future camps and travel, it sort of introduces them to camps and travel, and that's going to stand them in good stead for the future. Teamwork building, team building and friendships, important and fun. They go away and they do all these things without even pushing them. They jump in and do their session plans for their activities, and then they're off having fun, and they go and do their activities and they go and have fun. It's a really good environment to work within. So camps, big tick from me. So things to consider in setting up training camps, purpose and program. So it needs to fit within the program still. It needs to have a specific purpose that you're going to go away and work on. You need to have some activities you want to focus on, whether it's in triathlon, swim, bike and run, or whether it's basketball, working on court skills or that sort of thing. You need to have a specific purpose, but then the camp will just flow from that. Think about your venue and facilities. Think about safety, weather, support services, travel and ground transport, accommodation and food, really important. Like they're athletes, you need to feed them well. I remember we went to a Narrabeen camp once, and the first night we got there with 30 athletes, they gave us Scotch fillet and the other option was salmon. So we had like this incredible menu, but food is really important. Okay, so they need to have snacks, they need to be constantly fed, big breakfast, big lunch and big dinner, hydration, all those sort of things really important. But you can give them nutrition, education and that sort of stuff as part of the camp process as well. So really important. Coaching support, you need to think about that. And you need, as I said, to put it in the big picture. So make sure it fits within the program and it also fits within their pathway, progress and destination. Camps can be day focused. So you can go for a day and then go home and then come back the next day. You can just have one day, 6 to 8 hours. You can do 4 or 5 activities. Go to Cronulla and have a beach run and then a swim in the ocean, then do a bike ride at Kurnell and whatever. And that goes for 6 or 7 hours. That's in effect a day camp, as I call it. But you can go overnight as well. But just consider the benefit of having a 6 to 8 hour camp, maybe a day camp or maybe a 2-day camp, versus having, I don't know, every second week, 2 to 3 hours of training session. So if you have 4 or 5 of those, you're stopping and starting. Whereas if you go away for a day or you have 2 days away, you can do all that in 1 or 2 days rather than 5 or 6 2 or 3 hour sessions. So that's the sort of things we need to think about. So a mix of short sessions and camp environment or day environment activities is something to really work and think about. You need to plan them early. You need to recognise training load on athletes. So you don't want to just dump them into a 2-day or 3-day training camp after they've had a big race a couple of days before or a big week of training. So you need to be very careful with that. Think about training load. Consider other commitments and clashes. So there could be some competition coming up you don't want to interfere with. Make sure it fits within the season plan, and you also need to consider risk management. So you need to consider safety and how you're going to manage all those risks that go with that. But keep thinking about the time efficiency of having camps, day, 2-day, 3-day camps, really important. But again, it's not just about training and skills. So camps you can include and definitely include fun activities that help build friendships and team. And that's a really important aspect of camps. You can't really do that within a 2 or 3 hour skill session. But you can certainly do it within a day environment or a 2 or 3-day camp environment. So I just wanted to push that. Camps are really important. So going back there, that top photo there is a slide of a camp we had at Narrabeen maybe 6 years ago, and there's 30 athletes, triathletes and runners between, I don't know, 15 and 18 or 19. And down there, next level down was a camp we had in Canberra. That was on a bike session where we had swim, bike and run over 3 days. Different sessions in the AIS pool, climbing mountains on the bike, running track and running the cross-country trail at Mount Stromlo. So, but the important thing with all of that is that, and here I've got some feedback from some of the athletes who went on that camp, and here they are sitting around a table having lunch at Narrabeen. Caitlin here, for example, says, I realised triathlon could be a team sport rather than just being an individual sport. I realised that each individual has their own special skills and can learn off each other as part of a team. So they're the sort of things that these athletes were learning as part of this camp environment. Paige said, it was also very special to spend time with my friends and also to make new friends. Cody said, I was excited to make good friendships. Erin said, I was impressed by the teamwork and the archery was fun, especially making a pizza. Ella said, I thought the camp was awesome. The food was awesome. It was great being with other athletes and triathletes. Daniel said some interesting stuff down here. He said, throughout the 3 days, I realised the importance of a team within triathlon. Although our sport is individual, it is fantastic to surround yourself with people who understand the sport of triathlon. I realised that having fellow triathletes around can mean the difference between going out for a hard run or staying in bed. We were able to push each other and everyone completed all activities, which was fantastic. So they're the sort of things that I wasn't pushing these guys to come back with, but these are the sort of things that these athletes came back and said. And I think the big thing was that they happily did all the skill sessions we had, but they also participated in a whole range of other things. Like we had high ropes, we had archery, we did, orienteering, we had hot and cold plunge pools, the whole lot. We did everything, but we also did a lot of skill stuff, which was great. So, I know Steve's keen for us to think about having some camps or at least some day-long sessions, 6 to 8 hours, rather than having a proliferation of 2 to 3 hour sessions. So camps are definitely worth considering. Okay, finish up. It's taken a while and it's been through a few topics. So thoughts and catch points. So coach expectations. So proper planning is critical and upfront, really important. That program initially, and then having individual athlete performance plans in place and developing session plans as you go along, really important. Construct a season development plan and program outline that includes the academy sport framework requirements. That's critical. Okay, that's what we're really here for. Spend the appropriate time and plan each specific individual training session well ahead. So don't wait till the last minute to do your session plans. You know, maybe 3 or 4 days in advance at least, start working through session plan development. Develop an athlete skill acquisition program within a team squad environment relative to the high performance pathway level of your sport. So start tying your skill development and your tactical, physical and psychological development into the pathway process. Some catch points Steve was keen for us to talk about. Are we missing opportunities for team relationship building within the program? I think we need to think about that. How can we build teams and relationships in there, not just go out there and deliver skill sessions? Consider use of camps, for example, as team building. Include fun activities to help communication, interaction, problem solving and sharing, etc. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're really keen for coaches to think about having camps as well as obviously, 2 to 3 hour skill sessions, but having a mix would be really good. Does lack of or late planning of sessions contribute to lack of attendance or interest in programs? Well, I think it does in a way, but I think what we need to do is have a regime up front that's outlined that people can see initially, and they can sort of map out where they are over that 6 to 8 months of the program. And that's a really important thing. The program and working with CAT develop that, and then to publicise it as such is a really important aspect of what we do. Is there a limited understanding of the athlete lifecycle education component in season programs? In some ways, I think we haven't done it well enough in the past. I think we need to probably go back and look at the athlete lifecycle and make sure that certainly in our programming, we include all those aspects really and conscientiously. Academy direction, there's some of these things have come from Steve. Complete planning early. Well, that's always the comment, isn't it? We often leave it to the last minute, but we need to get onto things as early as we can and utilise checklists for planning programs and camps. So there's a lot of checklists around. We can always find those and maybe put some more up on the website on the coaches panel, Steve, for coaches to use. Maintain communication with the SWAS office on program planning. So Kat's already talked about having that template in place, and she'll be releasing that pretty soon. Be intentional about planning in time for the individual athlete performance plan, about education sessions, about camps and team building, and make sure it's not just about fundamental skill development. Okay, so what I'm saying here is we need to think about what we're delivering in a broader context, not just about skill development, but about education. It's about a whole range of other things as well. So that pretty much is me. I'm not sure how time's gone. It's probably 45 minutes. Any discussion, questions to me or Steve? Certainly happy to answer any questions. No, Steve, do you have any questions?
No, not questions. I guess, just go back and touching on those expectations and requirements in that respect. Just a slide before that one, Guy, if you don't mind. Just, again, the program planning and being time efficient in what we do and produce as coaches and getting in that planning early. Again, probably 75% of what we do as coaches is in that first space of the athlete framework and the individual skill development and planning our programs and development And really the only other, the 25% is across the board. So it does indicate a lot of time in the planning process. And again, as Guy said, the camps are to be intentional about building those relationships. And I guess the feedback we had last year and it was something that Dan from BMX raised and Cara raised in that respect is, well, how do you run a camp where it's not just going and riding a bike for 2 days? What activities do you put in that you still, if it's an overnight camp, still providing the athletes downtime, so we're not burning them out, but we're not training for 8 to 10 hours a day on the same thing. So we're providing them downtime, we're providing them time to find themselves, to build relationships. And if we're going to be three-dimensional coaches, and we talk about that a lot, and focus on the athlete as a person rather than their performance, then we need to be intentional about taking that time to build those relationships as well and get to know our athletes in their setting as well, not just ours. So again, I think we'd really like to see a move away from regular training sessions. They get that with their clubs and associations and their home coaches, and really think outside the square, think outside the box, and what we can do in a camp environment. As Guy said, even if it's just a day, an 8-hour day or 4 5-hour camps is your 20 hours of minimum individual skill development, or you've got 10 2-hour sessions. So again, we can go for 10 fortnights, or we can pick 4 camp situations and then an overnight camp in that respect, and get just as much, if not more, benefit and more opportunity for our athletes. And again, touching back on that program planning space about budgeting, that's our job to figure out costings and how we can work that. It might not always be a 5-star hotel. We might have to settle for a caravan park or cabins, and sometimes we might have to drive ourselves in Ava's 12-seat high aces. But again, that can be all part and parcel of the experience with the camp, and we do whatever we can to keep costs to a minimum. Believe me, there's not a great deal of money in the budget to do camps, but there's certainly enough there to try and maximize the opportunities that we have with our athletes. And we're obviously always looking for opportunities to even combine squads to go away for camps as well. So we're for example, triathlon might have 10 or 12 athletes, but they might have a similar setup to BMX, who's got 14 athletes, and it might be cheap for us to send 30 athletes away in that environment. So definitely keep that in the back of your mind, that it may not be just your camp, your squad that can go away on a camp. We can merge squads together and get an incredible benefit out of that.
No more questions? No? All good?
Okay. Well, I might steal the show just for a quick minute here. So I just wanted to touch very briefly again. Sorry, I should have asked Guy, have you finished your presentation?
Yes, mate. Sorry. Yep.
Cool. Sorry, before I take over. Again, everything is available on the Linktree app here. What I did want to show people who haven't seen it is this is actually the Linktree here itself. Seen on a desktop, it looks really good on the phone. So all the presentation material here, if you click this link here, we'll go to a hidden page on our website. You can see here, that's the video playlist. So tonight's session will be under here. And then the handouts and slides, these are the actual physical presentations from the PowerPoint presentation that Guy's presented tonight is this one right here. If we go to I think it's guidelines and manuals. If we click on that, then you can see here, we've got the manuals and policies, but as you further scroll down, you've got the resource booklets, program athlete development, and the templates. So tonight's session was based around this developing a program outline booklet. So if you clicked on that, you can see the booklet we've developed around developing a program outline, just to give you a bit of hints, tips, and advice on what we're expecting in there. And then as we go back, you can have a look at things like the training session outline and that sports programming checklist. Again, this is just one of what could be several examples of a template, but this is what Cat will use in your pre-program interviews and post-program interviews, just to check off what's been completed in your programs throughout the course of the year. And again, there are things in there such as the academy-wide education session and events that us as an organisation, the office, will plan some of these sessions, and then hopefully we can find the convenient time where they actually fit into your program. So again, that's all available on the Linktree Coach Network Resources app, as well as some of you getting familiar with the injury incident report form and the session and event feedback form that we ask you to complete after each training session or event that you participate in. So again, that's all there, available on the resource app there. And again, looking ahead, we touched a little bit on individual athlete performance plans tonight. We are developing a nice new form that athletes will be able to use in programs to provide feedback continually throughout the process. So on November 11, our next Coach Connect will be on providing athlete feedback, and we'll revisit the individual performance plans, as well as providing feedback to athletes, as well as getting feedback from athletes in that. And that will be presented by another member of the Coach Technical Advisory Group, and long-serving netball mentor coach and former head coach of our netball program, Van Newen, will present that one. So again, thank you for your participation again this evening. We'll keep the chat open for a few minutes if anyone's got any questions. If not, we'll see you on November 11.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Guy.